that. So we're going to look at the qualities of the student.
Well, Jane did have one question about, so how do we set out to find a teacher? How do we set about finding a teacher?
Well, it can be tricky. We're going to look at it a bit later on, but I can talk about it now if you like. We can actively set out to find a teacher, like either taking teachings, looking on YouTube, reading books from the different teachers, you know, His Holiness or Lama Zopa or whoever it might be. But we can also, you know, make prayers and dedications to find our teacher.
And is it, do you mean a literal teacher, like an actual human being that we can talk to, or?
Well, it can be an actual human being we can talk to or ask advice from, but it can also, you know, until then we can take Buddha as our teacher, and who we can't actually talk to now, but we can still also ask for, you know, inspiration, follow the example of. We can look at, you know, if we have particular initiations, like I'm not sure if you took the initiation of Chenrezig and Singanada, but, you know, if there are particular reading this, the life stories, some of the teachers, whether they're alive now or still in that body or however it might be, it can give us inspiration, and we can see that they have some of these qualities that are described, and then read more of their teachings and things like that. Because in a future lifetime, that might be the teacher we meet. And sometimes, you know, you can just be really fortunate to accidentally come across the teacher without putting much effort in. So I was quite fortunate in this way. I saw the teacher who was my main teacher of this life at one of His Holiness's teachings, and he was just sitting with a whole bunch of other monks, and it just fell into my head without, like there were probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 monks, I didn't count, and it just fell into my head that person will be very important in your life. And that turned out to, and I hadn't been to Langri Tampa Centre then. That was where I first got a flyer about Langri Tampa Centre. And then when I went there, he was the teacher there. So sometimes you can be incredible, you don't even know what you're looking for specifically to put it into words, but it can happen just like that sometimes.
Jan says, lucky you.
I know.
That. And also that, yeah, she needs the feedback of someone to be able to ask the lots of questions or clarify things. Yep.
And that's true. I was incredibly fortunate, absolutely incredibly fortunate. I had, prior to that day, I'd called myself Buddhist. I'd been to Buddhist teachings of teachers in different traditions, but this was pretty much what was the second time, but it was the first time His Holiness had spoken at a public teaching, and this was the second one on a visit to Brisbane in 1992. And yeah, I was just unbelievably fortunate, and I really appreciate that, you know, that was my good fortune, that I did have that happen for me. So one of the things we need to appreciate is the rebirth that we have now. And it's said that we have a rebirth with 8 freedoms or leisures and 10 endowments. So the freedoms are described as terms of being free of rebirths in the lower realms, or a human rebirth in an unfortunate state where there's no contact with the Buddhist path or no opportunity to follow a spiritual path. And so that's true for many, many humans. And then the 10 endowments, or sometimes called the 10 richnesses or the 10 opportunities, 5 are personal and 5 are environmental. So the personal ones are being born human, being born with complete senses, because if you think 2,500 years ago, if you were blind or deaf or something like this, very difficult to have any access to teachings. Born in a land with a spiritual culture, born in a land born free of heavy negative karma that would impede, stop us even appreciating all those things if they were there, having no respect for them, and having an interest in a spiritual path. So we can see that there are many humans who suffer, have these don't have these personal opportunities. And then the environmental opportunities, born when a Buddha has come, when the Buddha's taught the Dharma's still flourishing, the lineage of teachers still exist, and there are other people to help with study and practice. So we have all these wonderful freedoms and opportunities. And so having achieved these now, we've achieved what's called, if you like, a perfect human rebirth or a precious human rebirth. I gave a teaching once and used a perfect human rebirth, and someone waited right till the end to say, it's very hard to be a perfect human, and I just felt awful.
Oh.
But it's about the rebirth, the perfect rebirth, not being the perfect human. And so I try now to use the precious human rebirth because there's many human rebirths that don't have all those qualities, all those components that we have. And so it's much harder to find one that has all these qualities than just finding a regular human rebirth. So this having these opportunities, we can use it to progress, to work towards attaining enlightenment, putting the imprints in our mind of the teachings and the teachers, and dedicate towards finding these in all our future rebirths. So we need to purposefully, put effort into creating the positive karma we need, and so we can dedicate whatever virtuous ideas, thoughts, actions that we do to achieving these in our future lives. So, for instance, when we in the evening, when we look back on the day and see, virtuous things we've done, and we can remember all the virtuous things done by the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa, all the different teachers throughout the world, all those who've put effort into helping others, whether they're Buddhist or of other faiths or no faith at all. And we can dedicate all that virtuous activity towards achieving our goals in this lifetime and in our future lifetimes. Reba Rinpoche says that, this is the easiest way to accumulate merit, is to rejoice in all the virtuous actions of ourselves, but of all those who've done virtuous actions in the day. And he said this way we accumulate all the virtuous merit from rejoicing in those virtuous activities. So great waves of merit is how it was translated.
So Jan asked, how many rebirths does a person typically have, or is that not the right kind of question?
Well, if any question's the right type of question. Buddha said we have endless previous rebirths and endless rebirths to come until we achieve enlightenment. He could look, once he became enlightened, he could look back on his past rebirths, but he couldn't see back to a time when sentient beings didn't exist. So we can assume we've had all these past rebirths, and then this one rebirth we've got all these opportunities, and so making good use of them. And it's not that we won't have opportunities in the future, and we can dedicate towards having them. We can dedicate towards meeting again with the teachers we meet in this lifetime and that sort of thing. And as you know, we can progress on this lifetime, and maybe you achieve enlightenment in this lifetime. You know, so we're working towards it. We've got our spiritual goals. So then looking at the qualities of the disciple, these are the qualities that we develop in ourselves to make, to gain the best advantage from the teachings that we are able to have, and to be able to put them into practice as much as we can during this lifetime, because it benefits us in this lifetime, and then when we dedicate to future lifetimes, then we can, you know, we're not just doing for this lifetime. If we do it in this lifetime, that's fine, but if we dedicate it for being able to continue to do things in this way in our future lifetimes, the benefits in this lifetime and in our future lifetimes, all the way up until we achieve enlightenment. So when we're looking at the qualities for the disciple, the student, the first one we need to have is honesty. And so this means having an unbiased state of mind. So honesty may be equanimity, but our biased mind would mean that from our perspective, our own side takes precedence over everyone else. So the honesty in the disciple means being honest in your viewpoint, the way you think and the way you see, and having a greater sense of honesty that you can cultivate in yourself and help move your mind from always seeing mistakes in others and never seeing mistakes in yourself, or rarely seeing mistakes in yourself. And sometimes, you know, we see a mistake in others, someone does something and that's, you know, and then if we really contemplate, there's been times when we've done exactly that. But we have a good sense of tolerance towards our own faults. We can see, well, that was just a mistake I made because of this or that. We can find some reason why on this occasion, in this particular situation, it was just, you know, a one-off thing. And so we should try and apply that same sense of tolerance or equanimity towards faults that we might see in anyone, in our teachers, in other students, in other people. We all make mistakes, but sometimes we only sort of recognise them in other people. And the second quality that we need to have is the intelligence to be able to differentiate what is right and what is wrong, what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous. So if we don't have this sort of wisdom accompanying our honesty in relation to our own actions, people can take advantage of us. We're blind to, you know, what we're doing. We're not differentiating what it is that we're doing. We're not examining properly. So we don't recognise the disadvantages of just cherishing ourselves and not cherishing others. So we need this kind of wisdom. So if we're not protected by this inner discriminating wisdom, then someone could come along and say, oh, forget about all this altruistic stuff, it's just a waste of energy, you know. You might as well just, you know, give all that away and, you know, just look out for yourself, that sort of thing, which we know isn't, you know, the sort of thing we want to develop in our minds. And the third quality for a student is having faith and interest in achieving your own spiritual goals. And so these are described in Maitreya's book as in this order, but the way we develop them all in different, all at once, if you like, different levels of these. And so in actual practice, we need to cultivate this interest in developing our mind, in achieving our, in even developing spiritual goals and achieving those spiritual goals. And so that's sort of like the third one. And on that basis, we start developing our discriminating wisdom, seeing what helps us and what hinders us in that progress. And then we come to cultivate this unbiased mind, being completely honest about our own actions and realising that we need to look equally at things and cherish others and try to do our best to help them. So sometimes when we look at things like faith and things like that, which is one of the qualities we need to develop, it doesn't mean a blind faith just because someone says you should have faith in this or that. You should have faith in your teacher, your Buddha, whatever, but it's based on these qualities, our discriminating wisdom, our honesty with ourselves about the qualities we want to develop, this sort of thing. So if in terms of faith, we need to avoid blind faith. We want faith based in logic and reasoning, when we can see the advantage of behaving in this way or doing that particular thing helps us, and we're then able to help others. Similarly with, guru devotion, this respect for our teacher. It's only through the teachers we even get to hear about the Buddha and hear the Buddha's teachings. If the teachers weren't here with us now still, then we wouldn't be able to access the teachings clearly at all. But at the same time, we have to have this discriminating wisdom in regard to our teacher to some extent as well, not in a critical way, but there are things that, we don't have to do just everything the teacher said. It said in the past life stories of the Buddha, he was told in one lifetime when he was a Brahmin student, and his teacher said that Brahmins in distress could steal from others. And he said, no, stealing is wrong. It's always wrong. Stealing means if it's not freely offered. And so, if things are against the law of the land, because sometimes things are legal in one country and not another, those sorts of things, we need to be very clear that we don't just accept and do what someone else tells us. But when we come together with the teachers, the different teachers we have come to, then, this is from our past karmic connections. And so we need to keep those connections strong. So, sometimes this is not meant like some fairy tale where we meet our true love and live happily ever after. It's not like that. We know sometimes we meet people and we're comfortable with them even though we haven't known them for very long, and there are other people we have known much longer but we don't have that same level of closeness.
So in our daily life then, is it like highly unlikely that we'd meet or find a spiritual leader like this?
Well, it depends. If you look at the teachings online now or come to Dharma centres or whatever, there have been cases of students with a really quite high degree of skepticism about this, meeting a particular teacher. And there was a teacher a student who I knew who was, you know, very skeptical of this sort of thing. And he sort of felt that this was just, you know, some sort of wishy-washy, illogical thing. And we can remember, you know, that like Lama Atisha, there are different things we can learn from different teachers. It doesn't have to be a teacher we have a really strong, specific, heartfelt connection with. But this student then actually met a teacher, and immediately was this recognition, this is my main teacher for this lifetime. And so he completely had his socks blown off by that. And so he'd been a student for quite some years, and suddenly this happened. So it was a very awakening thing for him in the, you know, not things that come by just directly words in our mind, but an actual experience. And so when we, you know, when we've got a strong connection with our teacher, just like Lama Atisha, we can have that respect for the things that they can teach us. And then if we find them, you know, a teacher where we have this really strong connection, then we can rejoice in that, you know. And so we need to be careful if we ask our teachers for advice about something, because if we're just going to ask and then if we don't like what they say and we disregard it, then we'd be better off not asking, because that, if we think, oh, that doesn't suit me, in a way we're rejecting, it's better off not to ask unless we're really committed to follow what the teacher said. There's no fault in asking, but we just need to be careful about what it is we ask. So we read the teachings of the Buddha and all the great teachers, but we do this in a way that where we really examine the teachings. And the Buddha taught about examining his teachings, talking about his own teachings, the way a goldsmith examined gold in that time, 2,500 years ago. And the first thing they did was cut it to make sure it wasn't just gold on the outside, to see that it was gold all the way through. And so this is for us to see, you know, do these teachings make sense all the time, or are they just once in a while they make sense? Is it helpful for us or not? And then the second way they examined it was to melt the gold, because if there are impurities, you know, like other metals mixed in with the gold, they'd settle out when the gold was heated. And the gold always goes back to being gold. Whether, you know, if it was some other yellow metal, once you heat it, then it'll just go to something, it wouldn't go directly back to gold. You can heat and cool gold however many times you like, it goes back to being that pure gold. And the third way is to polish it, to see if it develops that characteristic luster that gold has. And so we can, the more we increase our practice of the Buddhist teachings, the more we should be able to see our progress improving, being able to remove different obstacles we might have. And so in Buddhism, we need to understand that we have this inner life and to recognise this inner being that we have. On an external or physical level, we can see what brings us pleasure and what's painful and that sort of thing. But in our mental suffering, it's not always easy to relate that to external circumstances, but it can lead to a huge amount of misery. And so our inner life in this way is quite important because it doesn't depend on external events. And our current outer life, the different things that happen, they may not influence our future lives, but how we respond to them, then that can create karmic seeds and imprints that influence this life and our future lives. All the external things, they're temporary. Our own life is temporary. We leave the external things behind, we leave this body behind, but we take with us all the imprints of how we've responded to those different things. So if we, Buddha taught that we need to take some responsibility for our happiness and suffering, not looking outward and blaming others, but looking at what we can do internally, how we can generate our own contentment and peace and happiness in our life. And then this influences the different things that we are able to do in relation to helping others, but also in our future lifetimes. So, as I said before, we understand the teachings intellectually, we contemplate them, we meditate on them, and then we have that experience in our mind, strengthening those different qualities. And then we can bring them more strongly into our life each day. And we can also learn to use those beneficial qualities and when we're dealing with other people, other situations, whether we like them or not. There might be particular situations we dislike considerably, different things related to our work, our neighbours, whatever. But, we don't have to have within us that same, we may not think that that's a beneficial situation, but we don't have to become, obstructive and judgmental and biased about it. And this can be really challenging. We feel close to some people, there are some situations we feel comfortable, that we can, develop our mind to be more able to deal with them. So this doesn't mean that we should be putting ourselves into any unsafe situations or anything like that. What we're trying to do is develop some equanimity that sort of counteracts our bias towards wanting a particular outcome or not liking a particular group of people because they all are like that. They're not all like anything. They're as varied as we are. And so if we can become more aware of our own inner biases, and most of us have some because of our experiences or the way we've been brought up or whatever. There might be any number of reasons why we've developed some sort of prejudice towards particular groups of people or particular individuals and things like that. And, we need to be aware of our own safety and things like that. But we can also be careful to keep in mind that there are people themselves, animals themselves, and then there's, their actions, their behaviour. And we'd like ours to be separated when we've been angry or whatever we might have done and said. We have that tolerance to say, yeah, but in that situation I was unwell, I had the flu, or someone else had upset me, and blah blah. We need to think about that about also for others. And even so-called very good people might act inappropriately in certain situations. So there are different things we can do, different things we can work around for things. And so in following the advice of the teacher, my first teacher had said to me that, because I'd asked her advice about something and said I couldn't possibly, I don't have any of the skills or anything to do that at all well. And she said, well, that's okay, you can sponsor someone else to do that. You can just, you can get someone else to do that. And she gave me advice about how to do that, and I did that, and that worked out really well. So then at one subsequent time, much later, I had this dream. There was a lot of talk at the time around the translator, having enough translators for the different centres. There were new FPMT centres opening up around the world. There were teachers willing to come and teach, but they were Tibetan speakers, so they required translators, and there weren't many around. So a translator school was set up, but the person who wanted to go and become a translator needed to have sufficient funds to actually support themselves at that time, through that 2 years in India. So this is quite a thing to do, to move your life for 2 years to India and all that sort of thing. So probably because there was this talk about it and need for it. But anyway, I'd had a couple of nights in a row, I'd had this dream about becoming a translator, which is pretty ridiculous, seeing I've got a very poor record with, learning new languages. I don't have an ear for the different sounds of different languages, the different pronunciations. But it was strong in my mind, strong enough that I asked my teacher. I said I'd had this dream, and several times, not just once, and was there any, I'd sort of felt impelled that I should do something about it. And he said, well, if you went and became a translator, you could study in Tibetan and you'd get the teachings directly rather than through a translator, and, that'd probably be helpful. And what he didn't say go and do it, but he pointed out the advantages of me being able to do that. And I thought, given my health, given my poor, history with any foreign language words, assorted thing, living in India physically for 2 years, it'd probably just be repatriated back due to ill health. So there was someone I knew who happened to turn up at the teachings that very night, didn't come very often because of other things, but turned up that night, who was very keen to become a translator, but a young person, didn't have any money. And so I thought, well, this young person, if they become a translator, they're going to be a translator for like 20 plus years more than me. I'm much older. And they were very keen. I'd been talking about it for quite a while. So what I did was I sponsored them to go and do the course. And it turned out really well. They did very well in the course. And since then, they've been an excellent translator. And there was one teacher, and probably more than one, that said they'd come back to Australia and teach, but only if that person would be their translator. So, it was so fortunate that I was able to sponsor that person to do it, because I very much doubt that my physical capacity would have been able to live there that long. And yeah, so
it kind of opens up a whole lot of possibilities instead of feeling sad, oh no, I'll never be able to do that.
Well, that's right. It does open up the possibilities and the benefits there for all those people who hear, the translations from that person. Whereas, yes, it was much more beneficial than me thinking physically I should do. And my teacher didn't say, you go and do it, thankfully. Because I think there would not have been that much benefit as it turned out. So sometimes it's things like that we can do. And we can always have that aspiration that may someone come along and be translator. May there be enough translators for us to be able to benefit from the teachings. It isn't that we have to actually go and be the translator. Of course, if we have those skills and that capacity, then a great thing to do if that's what our teacher says.
Very nice story.
So are there any questions before we go? Because we've got a little meditation on equanimity.
Just a little while ago, Jan kind of mentioned that sometimes she feels a strong affiliation with a particular culture rather than a different one. So is that perhaps because you've lived in that time then, or in that culture in a previous life? Or
More than likely, I think it's true that because we've had these many lifetimes, we might remember our specific, but if we've got that, that affinity with it, more than likely in some lifetime we've lived within that culture or held the values of that culture, and we see them reflected there.
Okay, so Jan learns the Japanese tea ceremony, and her teacher often says, "I'm more Japanese than the other girls there."
Oh, lovely! Oh, that's really lovely. So yes, it's a very lovely ceremony, very, very gentle and giving, and so I'm glad that your teacher appreciates your learning all of that.
And so, yeah, such a compliment. And also, isn't it so nice to be able to make the teacher happy?
Absolutely, absolutely. So doing something like that for your teacher, it's a very beneficial thing, a very lovely offering to be able to do it, just as the way that they like. Okay, so having a little rearrange of your physical posture and sitting in a comfortable posture so that you feel your body's going to be all nice and comfortable. And just settling your mind on your breath in whichever way is going to be useful to just let your concentration develop. Letting go of all external and internal obstacles to your concentration. And our motivation is to generate a strong intention to be doing this, taking this time in order to overcome self-centered bias or judgments and to develop the mind of perfect equanimity and balance towards others. Imagine in the space in front of you 3 people, someone you like, someone you dislike, and someone you feel indifferent towards. And keep these 3 images in your mind as we do this meditation. First, focus on your friend and allow your feelings for that person to arise strongly. Feel your conviction that this person's definitely and truly a friend, a person who's good to you and fulfills your needs and wishes. Also, feel how you really want this person to be happy. Identify with these good feelings. Now shift your attention to the person you dislike, the enemy, the one who's not kind to you, the person who doesn't satisfy your needs, doesn't even care about them, the one who annoys you or hurts you, and regard this person carefully. Look at the feelings you have about this person. Finally, shift your attention to the so-called stranger, the person you don't know. someone you neither like nor dislike. And looking at them, take note of your feelings. Maybe indifference, no strong feelings. Now consider and recognise that the nature of your relationship with each of these three people and the labels that you've put on them are based solely on what they do or don't do at this point in time. Think of people who've been your friend but then became your enemy. Those who used to be your enemy and became your friend. Strangers who became friends and enemies. And each of these labels is temporary and impermanent. Just reflecting what the current situation is. Now move your attention back to your friend and imagine a situation that would cause the friendship to end. Imagine your friend turning against you and experience the upset and hurt that you would feel in such a situation. Do you still feel warm and friendly towards the person? Do you still wish them well? Where is your friend now? Remember that this person was not your friend before you were acquainted, and recognise how easily this person could cease to be your friend now, just as you've imagined. Think to yourself, there's no sound reason for feeling kind and loving towards only the friend of this moment. Relationships have changed in the past and they'll continue to change. Today's friend could become tomorrow's enemy. Or they could move away and become a stranger. Now move your attention to the current enemy and imagine a situation in which you could be drawn together and become close. A common interest, a word of praise, an act of kindness. Look at that person, your feelings towards them. Are your feelings softening, becoming warmer? We can learn to feel warmly towards our enemies. This has happened before and will happen again. Why do we hold so strongly to the concept that this person is definitely an enemy? When we do that, it's difficult to see the positive qualities of the person. Now move your attention to the stranger and imagine how one act of kindness or anger from this person could immediately turn them into a friend or an enemy. There's no inherent, definite stranger there. There's no sound reason for the feelings of indifference that we hold on to. Remember, your present friend and your present enemy were both strangers to you in the past, and this enemy could become a friend. This stranger could become a friend or enemy. This current friend could become a stranger or an enemy. So maintain your awareness of these three people in front of you. Think about the fragile impermanence of these relationships. It's only our misconceived belief in the concreteness of these labels of friend, enemy, and stranger that hold us back from the possibility of change, the possibility of improving our relationships. The friend, the enemy, and the stranger all want happiness, just as much as we all do. And in this respect, we are all equal. Everyone's also equal in having the potential to develop their minds to the fullest extent and to achieve ultimate clarity and compassion. The differences that we see in people are superficial, based only on our mistaken and narrow, self-centered views. In fact, everyone's equal in deserving our care and compassion. None of this means that we should not discriminate at all. On a practical level, our ability to distinguish between actions and individuals is necessary. Naturally, we feel closer to some people and are wise to keep our distance from others. This is not in any way contradictory to the meditation. The meditation's about our attitude. The point of the meditation is to develop equal concern, equal regard for everyone. Whether they help or harm us at this point in time, we need to have equal concern for them to find their way onto a spiritual path, and to see that the labels that we put on others are often mistaken, and they're very changeable. We all have the potential to develop our minds and overcome our mistaken ways of behaving. We're going to dedicate this meditation and all the positive energy and insights that you may or may not have developed for the well-being and happiness of all living beings, and read the dedication verses from His Holiness the Dalai Lama's favourite dedications. May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the hopeless find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all the medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may we too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.